watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representative Andrew Stoddard and former Speaker of the House Greg Hughes. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Great to have you.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with the Olympic boycott. We saw Utah Representative Chris Stewart come out during the week saying the president's diplomatic boycott was not enough. He wants a full-on boycott. Greg, let's start with you. Your thoughts on that?
I support it. I think that boycott lights aren't really going to send the message that you want. I think that China has been incredibly aggressive in a very dangerous way. And if this isn't a moment where not just the United States, but other countries, not just diplomatic boycotts, but boycotting these games, I don't know when you would do something like that. And I think that you have the Muslim Uyghurs or Uyghurs, the concentration camps that are going on. You have you just have a lot of things happening where China is becoming more aggressive. You got to draw a bright line. And I know that we have great athletes that have prepared hard for these games, but this is supposed to be the world coming together. These are nations coming together. And I think that you can't have venues like Beijing in times like this to have the Olympic Games. I think it's, I support Representative Stewart.
Representative Stoddard, this is a split within our delegation. Senator Romney, of course, calling and supporting for the diplomatic boycott, asking other countries to join. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the diplomatic boycott is perfect. I mean, you look at the Olympics and it's something that unites us as a country, and to boycott that as a whole, I get that it's an important message that we need to send, and that we need to send some sort of message to China, but I don't think it should be at the expense of our athletes and our nation.
Greg, you hit on that, but let's talk about that a little bit more. These are people who have prepared their whole lives. They've had their sights set on this since they were kids. They've been working hard. So why should they not have that opportunity to go and compete?
You never take something like this lightly. I know that there's talk that the 1980 boycott that President Carter did when the USSR invaded Afghanistan was an important message to not attend Moscow because of that aggression. And there is still, it's still a raw and an unpleasant and hard moment for a lot of Olympians that were not able to compete in those games. But I don't know who would look back at those times when the USSR was being that aggressive and shrug their shoulders and going, man, I wish we would have played. It does have its consequences, and it's not fair. But that's what happens when you have tyrants, when you have countries that are acting in ways that make the planet more dangerous. And you've got to find ways to really make that statement. It would be a far greater statement and a real statement if you saw these boycotts of the Beijing Olympics, because they deserve it.
So full boycott or diplomatic boycott, does either of them really change anything within China, Representative?
I don't think so. You know, you look at all the backlash they've gotten from so many different arenas, and I think ultimately they're going to keep doing what they're doing, unfortunately.
Greg, that same question to you. Either one, what really impact does it have on China?
I think the diplomatic one will go unnoticed. I don't know how many countries. I know Australia has agreed to boycott diplomatically as well. There's other countries that have. I don't think it'll even be mentioned. If it were a real boycott and you saw these nations absent in these games, I think it would make a difference. And I think that China would lose face in a moment like that when the world comes together, and rightly so. And so I do think it would make a difference if there was a true and full boycott of our Olympic Games.
Let's move on to tax cuts. It's a big topic of conversation right now. Of course, we saw the governor's proposal going toward a food tax credit. Other lawmakers talking about maybe going an income tax route instead. Representative Stoddard, let's start with you. Your thoughts on the governor's proposal? Yeah,
I think it's fantastic. I think in terms of what we're looking at for a tax cut, it's the best way to do it. It's going to go to the people who actually need a tax cut. You know, we have a huge surplus this year, which is fantastic. Our state's growing. We've had a great economy considering everything that's going on. But we do still have a lot of people in need, and this would be a way to be able to give back to them and help them.
Greg, do you like the food tax credit idea?
You know, I like the concept and I like the idea, especially when you see inflation going up as much as it is. It's hitting every family. Every working family is feeling the inflation. 6 to 10% is like a 6 to 10% decrease in your income when you're buying food and when you're buying other items. So the tax on food is going to be felt, I think, dearly by everyone in the weeks and the months and the years that we're in right now. So I love the concept. My only concern is, does the water get to the end of the row? Do the people that most need the relief of a food tax and have that removed or rebated back, are their accountants going to get them that credit so they can claim it on their tax returns? Are we talking about people that will have the ability to or will file their taxes in a way to where the word's out, people know about it, and will be able to get that tax credit, food tax credit. I worry about that. I don't know that. I want to see how that system is going to play out and how we make sure that those that are in need are able to take advantage of that food tax credit. But across the board, families are going to be feeling the crunch of inflation and the cost of living going up the way it is. And so we need to, I think lawmakers need to find a way to find that tax relief.
Already are feeling that, no doubt about it. Representative, your thoughts on the point Greg brings up, as will those who really need it be able to go through the process of getting the credit?
Yeah, and that's my concern as well. You know, obviously we need to make sure that people are able to get this as opposed to just sounding nice and then no one applying for it. But I do like that this is targeted towards the people who need it most, and hopefully there's some programming there to help those get that.
Okay, let's move on to another big story during the week. President Trump's former Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, found the Congress voting to hold him in contempt of Congress, criminal contempt. We saw some pretty interesting text messages come out in that process as well. His son, Donald Trump Jr., saying he's got to condemn ASAP. Other Fox News hosts saying, destroying everything you have accomplished, encouraging the president to get out in front of this and put an end to it. Greg, your thoughts on what we saw unfold this week?
I don't know why that's news. I think that if I watch Fox News, so I don't have to hear from pundits or CNN commentators tell me what was actually said during the time and aftermath of the violence on January 6th. Republicans, Fox News commentators have been very consistent through the year 2020, condemning all the violence and all the riots and all the destroying of federal
buildings. But they were
buildings.
calling on the president to do it here,
Absolutely.
were they not?
I mean, I don't know why that's a shock to anyone. Why wouldn't they be? I mean, are we?
So
I
did
don't
the
even
president
understand what the
appropriately
controversy
address
is.
that in your view?
Pardon me?
Did the president appropriately address that on that day in your view?
Yes, I think he came in front of the television twice that day, telling people to stand down and go and to depart from the Capitol. I'll tell you this: people have said that the Fox News commentators who sent those texts were hypocritical in their coverage of that day. Go back and watch. They were condemning the violence, and they were condemning that just as they had the violence the year prior. You don't see that kind. You see more selective outrage and logic on the Democrat side in terms of what violence and what riots they were okay with sending. You know, Kamala Harris had a bail fund that she was creating for those that were arrested in riots, and then condemning what happened on January 6th. I would argue that you saw Republicans and you saw these news commentators. They were very consistent about condemning violence from any side.
Okay, Representative, your thoughts on what we saw unfold this week?
Yeah, I mean, and I have to courteously disagree. I think this is completely newsworthy, and I think it's not getting enough news coverage. Obviously, this is something that has changed our nation, and anything that comes out regarding it, we should focus on. You know, this was an assault on democracy, and our president at the time didn't do enough to stop it, and in fact did the opposite to encourage it, and I think we need to still hold the people accountable who are promoting violence.
So what will ultimately happen? Where should it go from here? Representative, I'll give you the first shot on that.
Yeah, you know, I wish a lot of these people would participate in these hearings, because I think it would be nice to have answers as to what went wrong and why things happened the way they did. And so I don't like to see these contempt charges, because I wish that the people would just give the answers that we're looking for.
All right, Greg, let's go over to you. What about that point? Why not just go to the hearing and talk about what the commission wants to hear?
Well, I think I don't think it's a fair process. I think it's been weaponized. You had came out yesterday or today that a text that was attributed to Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio was actually a portion of a text, and it was actually him forwarding a legal analysis where the paragraph was stopped, the sentences that were shared were misleading, and that has had to be acknowledged. And it's sad, because the problem is you're weaponizing this. We're weaponizing our political offices in a way that, again, selective outrage, selective logic, and I don't think it's a thorough or fair process at all. I wouldn't play in that circus at all.
All right, we have about 30 seconds left. Representative, is this a fair process? Is it being weaponized?
It's a fair process, and what's being weaponized is the speech that we saw from our former president, as well as his supporters that continue to use hateful and violent speech.
All right, Greg, we do have about 15 seconds. I'll give that to you.
Just look at America right now. Look at the crime that's up, the violent crime. Look at the violence that happened all through 2020, and even the violent crime we see growing today. This did not come from the Republican side. It didn't come from President Trump. You've had this excusing of violence. You had the Capitol Hill autonomous zones, the Chaz zones, that were, if that isn't the definition of riots and insurrections, I don't know what would be.
Right.
We've seen this. We lived through it. You can't keep pointing at President Trump in the times that we're in right now.
Okay, we have run out of time, gentlemen. Thanks so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.